The galaxy was old. Very, very old. Civilizations had risen and fallen across billions of years. Stars had been born and died. Empires had stretched across thousands of worlds, only to crumble into dust and be forgotten. And through it all, 12 species had survived. They called themselves the Galactic Concord, and they ruled everything worth ruling. The Vitherans could read minds and speak without words. The Korath were walking tanks with armored skin that could stop energy weapons. The Selenics could survive in the cold emptiness of space without suits. Each of the 12 species had something special, something that made them powerful. Then there were the humans. The Concord had found Earth 300 years ago, a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star. The creatures living there had just figured out how to travel between stars. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were weak. Their bodies were soft and fragile. The Concord had watched these humans with mild interest. They let them join the galactic community mostly because it would have been too much trouble to say no. They gave humans a seat on the ruling council, though everyone knew that seat meant nothing. They allowed humans to colonize worlds that nobody else wanted, rocks with bad atmospheres, planets too close to unstable stars, places that real civilizations would never bother with, and the humans had accepted all. Of this with quiet smiles and polite thank yous, Ambassador. Elena Vasquez had represented humanity on the Concord Council for 20 years. She was 63 years old, with gray hair and calm brown eyes. Every day, she sat in her small seat at the back of the great council chamber and listened to the real powers of the galaxy make decisions. Sometimes, they asked for her opinion. She always gave it carefully and humbly. Sometimes they made jokes about humans. She always laughed along politely. The other ambassadors thought she was exactly what they expected from a human. Harmless, unremarkable, forgettable. They had no idea who she really was. On the day, everything changed. Alina was sitting in her usual seat when the alarms began. Red lights flashed across the chamber. The ancient walls shook with the sound of warning sirens that had not been used in 10,000 years. High Counselor the Sonvex of the Vitherans rose from his floating throne. He was the oldest living being in the Concord, nearly 2,000 years old. His thin gray body trembled as he spoke the words that would send terror through 1 trillion hearts. The devouring swarm has changed course. It is coming here. The chamber erupted into chaos. Alina watched quietly as the most powerful beings in the galaxy lost their composure. The Korath war chief slammed his massive fists against his chair. The Selenics ambassador's crystalline body flickered with panic colors. Even the cold, emotionless Netherok showed something that might have been fear. The devouring swarm. Alina had read the files. Everyone had read the files. A fleet of 1 billion living ships controlled by a single ancient mind. It moved through the universe like a plague, consuming everything in its path. 17 civilizations had fallen before it across 100,000 years. Not defeated, consumed, eaten, erased so completely that only whispered legends remained. For centuries, the swarm had been moving away from Concord space. It had been someone else's problem, a distant nightmare that would never come home. Now it was coming. How long? Demanded Gorak, the Unbroken, the Korath war chief. His voice was like thunder. The Sinvex answer came out as a whisper. 48 standard days, as the chaos grew worse. Ambassadors shouted at each other. Ancient alliances were invoked. Old enemies promised to set aside their differences. Military commanders were summoned. Scientists were consulted. Prayers were offered to gods that most had stopped believing in long ago. For hours, they calculated and planned and argued. They counted their ships. They measured their weapons. They estimated how many soldiers they could gather. And finally, they arrived at a number. A simple number that represented their chances of survival: 0. The swarm was too large, too powerful, too hungry. The combined military might of the Galactic Concord could slow it down for perhaps a month. Then it would consume them all, just as it had consumed everyone else. High Counselor Thesenvex looked around the chamber at his fellow leaders. His telepathic voice touched their minds, heavy with despair. "We should discuss evacuation options. Perhaps some of our people can escape to distant galaxies." That was when Ambassador Elena Vasquez raised her hand. The chamber fell silent. Not out of respect, but out of surprise. The human rarely spoke in council sessions. When she did, it was usually to agree with whatever the real powers had already decided. "The council recognizes the representative of Earth," Vesenvek said, his tone carrying the tired patience of someone humoring a child. Alina stood. Her movements were slow and calm. She straightened her simple gray uniform and looked around at the ancient beings who had dismissed her kind for 3 centuries. "Humanity would like to handle this ourselves," she said. The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then the laughter began. It started with the Korath. Gorik's deep, booming laugh echoed off the chamber walls. Then the Vitherans joined in, their telepathic amusement rippling through every mind in the room. Soon, all 12 species were laughing. Some tried to be polite about it. Others did not bother. Alina waited. Her expression did not change. Her hands remained still at her sides. She had known this would happen. She had planned for it. When the laughter finally died down, Vesenvek wiped tears from his ancient eyes. "Ambassador Vasquez, we appreciate the enthusiasm of your species. But this is not the time for jokes. The swarm has destroyed civilizations that were old when your ancestors were still living in caves. Your fleet numbers fewer than 1,000 vessels. Your weapons are generations behind our own. With respect, what could humanity possibly offer?" Alina smiled. It was a small smile, quiet, patient, the kind of smile that should have warned them something was wrong. "Counselor," she said, "you have known humanity for 300 years. In all that time, have you ever wondered why we accepted every insult? Why we took the worst worlds you offered and never complained? Why we smiled when you laughed at us?" The chamber grew quiet again. This time, the silence felt different, heavier. "You assumed we were weak," Alina continued. "You assumed we were primitive. You assumed we were exactly what we appeared to be." She paused. "You assumed wrong." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. It looked simple, harmless, forgettable, just like humans. In exactly 12 hours, Alina said, "Humanity will deploy its response to the devouring swarm. We respectfully ask that Concord forces remain clear of the combat zone." She looked around the chamber one final time. "You may want to watch. It will be ... educational." She pressed a button on the device and walked out of the chamber, leaving 12 ancient civilizations in stunned silence behind her. Outside, the stars burned cold and bright. Somewhere in the darkness, the swarm was coming. And somewhere else, hidden in places no one had ever thought to look, humanity was waking up. 300 years of patience was about to pay off. Deep in the cold darkness between stars, something massive began to move. "Hi, Admiral." Chen Wei stood on the bridge of the HSS Prometheus and watched her tactical display come alive with lights. Each light represented a ship. Each ship represented years of secret work. Each year represented sacrifices that the galaxy would never know about. 17,000. Warships emerged from hiding places that should not have existed. They rose from inside hollowed-out asteroids. They launched from beneath the frozen surfaces of dead moons. They powered up inside the cores of planets that the Concord had dismissed as worthless rocks. For 300 years, humanity had been building in the shadows. Now those shadows were opening like the petals of a deadly flower. Chen Wei was 61 years old. She had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. So had her mother, and her grandmother, and her great-grandmother before that. The Chen family had commanded human warships for 7 generations, passing down secrets that could never be written down. All fleets report ready. Admiral said her first officer, Commander James Okonkwo. His voice was steady, but she could see the excitement in his eyes. They had all waited so long for this. "Begin deployment pattern Omega-7, Chen ordered, and open a channel to Earth." On Earth, in a hidden command center beneath the mountains of Switzerland, The leaders of humanity's true government gathered around a massive holographic display. These were not the politicians who smiled for cameras and gave boring speeches. These were the Shadow Council, the keepers of secrets, the architects of a 300-year plan. President Maria Santos stood at the center of the room. She was only 45, the youngest to ever hold this position. But age meant nothing here. Only results mattered. Admiral Chen, Santos said, "You have full authorization. Show them what we really are." Across the galaxy, the Concorde watched in disbelief as their sensors filled with impossible readings. Human ships appeared where there should have been nothing. Human signals came from places that had been scanned 1,000 times and found empty. On the Concorde Council station, High Counselor the Senvex reached out with his powerful telepathic mind, trying to understand what was happening. He touched the minds of human crew members on the approaching fleet and immediately pulled back in shock. He could not read them. Their thoughts were shielded behind walls of pure mental discipline, not by machines or technology, but by their own trained willpower. Every human mind he touched was a locked fortress. "How is this possible?" he whispered, on one of the worthless colony worlds that the Concorde had given to humanity. A woman named Dr. Yuki Tanaka walked through a facility that officially did not exist. Around her, thousands of scientists shed their disguises and took their stations. The farmer who had grown vegetables for the local market was actually a weapons designer. The teacher who had taught children their letters was really an expert in shield technology. The merchant who had sold trinkets to tourists was one of the greatest physicists humanity had ever produced. They had all lived double lives. They had all kept the secret. They had all waited for this day. Dr. Tanaka had spent 40 years of her life designing weapons that could kill a god. Now she would finally see if they worked. "Systems check complete," reported her assistant, a young man named David who had pretended to be a cook for the past 5 years. "All Prometheus protocol weapons are online." Tanaka nodded. "Send the activation codes to the fleet." In the council chamber, the Korath war chief Gorak demanded answers. He was not used to being surprised. He was not used to feeling fear. Both sensations made him angry. "Explain this." He roared at the human ambassador who had returned to her seat. "Where did these ships come from? How did you hide them from us?" Alina Vasquez folded her hands calmly in her lap. "We hid them in plain sight, Chief Gorak. You gave us colony worlds that you considered worthless. Planets with toxic atmospheres. Moons too small to matter. Asteroids too remote to check. We thanked you for your generosity and got to work. But our scans found exactly what we wanted them to find," Alina interrupted gently. "Your scanning technology is impressive, but we have spent 3 centuries studying it. We know every frequency, every wavelength, every blind spot. You taught us how to hide from you. We were very good students." The Selenix ambassador's crystalline form flickered with colors of confusion and anger. "Your ships, your weapons. They appear to be ... more advanced than yours." Alina finished. "Yes, they are. Impossible. You have only had access to galactic technology for 300 years. We have refined our weapons over millions of years." Alina smiled that small, patient smile again. "You refined your weapons over millions of years because you had no reason to hurry. You were the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Nothing threatened you. Nothing pushed you to innovate." Her smile faded. "Humanity has never had that luxury. We spent our entire existence as a species knowing that something bigger and stronger might come along at any moment. We never stopped being afraid. And fear, Ambassador, is the greatest motivator in the universe." Aboard the Prometheus, High Admiral Chen received a data packet from Dr. Tanaka's facility. She opened it and reviewed the contents. Everything was ready. Every weapon, every strategy, every backup plan, and backup plan for the backup plan, Admiral Commander Okonkwo said quietly. "The Concorde is requesting detailed specifications of our fleet. They want to know what we have." Chen considered this for a moment. "Denied. They will see what we have when we use it." She turned to face her bridge crew. All hands, this is the Admiral speaking. Her voice echoed through 17,000 ships. Through hidden bases on 100 worlds, through the hearts and minds of every human who had ever dreamed of this moment. For 300 years, we have worn masks. We have pretended to be less than we are. We have smiled at their jokes and accepted their scraps and thanked them for the privilege of being overlooked. Her voice hardened. That ends today. She looked at the tactical display. The devouring swarm was 36 hours away. 1 billion vessels hungry for destruction. An ancient evil that had consumed everything it had ever touched. We are not fighting for respect. We are not fighting for revenge. We are not fighting to prove anything to anyone. Chin's voice softened. We are fighting because innocent people will die if we don't. Because entire civilizations will be erased. Because someone needs to stand between the darkness and the light. And we are the only ones who can. She straightened her uniform. Humanity has spent 3 centuries preparing for a threat we hoped would never come. Now it is here, and we are ready. She paused. All ships move to intercept positions. We deploy in 12 hours. Across the fleet, across the hidden bases, across the whole of human space, a single response came back. Not in words, but in action. Engines powered up. Weapons systems activated. Crews took their stations. The galaxy had underestimated humanity. That mistake was about to become very, very clear. The Korath war chief Gorak had commanded armies for 400 years. He had fought in 17 wars. He had seen civilizations burn and empires crumble. He thought he had seen everything the universe had to offer. He was wrong. The human warship that greeted his inspection shuttle was called the Defiance. It was smaller than a Korath battleship. Its hull was plain gray metal, without the decorations and symbols that other species used to show their power. It looked simple. Almost boring, then Gorak stepped aboard, and his 3 hearts nearly stopped beating. The weapons systems were unlike anything he had ever seen. Energy cannons that his engineers could not understand. Missile systems that used technology that Korath had only dreamed about. Shield generators that operated on principles that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics. How? He demanded of the human captain who guided him through the ship. How did you develop this? Captain Sarah Okonkwo, grandmother of the first officer on the Prometheus, smiled politely. She was 78 years old and had been commanding warships since before Gorak's youngest great-grandchild was born. "We studied your technology," she explained simply. "And the Vithran's technology. And the Selenek's technology, and everyone else's. We took the best ideas from each species and combined them. Then we improved them. But we never shared our military secrets with you? No, you didn't share them on purpose." Captain Okonkwo's smile grew slightly wider. "But you left your ships in our repair yards. You let human engineers service your systems. You allowed human scientists to observe your weapons tests." She shrugged. "You saw us as harmless. You never thought to hide anything from creatures as weak as us." Gorak felt something cold settle in his stomach. It was not fear exactly. It was something worse. It was the realization that he had been a fool. Across the fleet, similar scenes played out. Concord observers boarded human vessels and discovered technologies that should not have existed. Weapons that could crack planets. Shields that could shrug off attacks that would destroy battleships. Engines that moved faster than anything in Concord space. But the most terrifying discovery came from the Vithrans. High Counselor Thessenvex personally led a delegation to the Prometheus. He was the most powerful telepath alive. He had read the minds of kings and criminals. He had touched the thoughts of beings across the galaxy. He had never encountered a mind he could not open until now. He stood on bridge of the Prometheus and reached out with his mental powers toward High Admiral Chen. He pushed against her mind. With 2,000 years of telepathic experience, and he found nothing but walls, not just walls, fortresses, labyrinths, of mental discipline that turned his probes aside like water flowing around stone. Every human on the ship was the same. Their minds were locked tight, protected by training that must have taken lifetimes to develop. You have been teaching your people to resist telepathy, this Vex said. His voice was shaking. For how long? Admiral Chen turned to face him. Her eyes were calm and steady. Since the day we met you, Counselor, we knew that telepathic species would be able to read our thoughts. We knew that would make keeping secrets impossible. So we learned to protect our minds. But this level of discipline, it would take generations to develop. 300 years, Chen confirmed. Every human child is taught mental shielding from the age of 3. By the time they reach adulthood, their minds are impenetrable. She paused. Even to you. This Vex staggered backward. For 2,000 years, he had relied on his ability to read the thoughts of others. It was how he understood the universe. It was how he knew truth from lies. It was the foundation of everything he was. And now that foundation had cracked. What are you? He whispered. What have you become? Admiral Chen did not answer immediately. She looked out at the stars through the bridge's massive windows. Somewhere out there, the swarm was coming. 1 billion vessels of death and hunger. The greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced. We became what we had to become, she said finally. We were a young species in an ancient galaxy. We were weak where others were strong. We were short-lived where others measured their years in centuries. We had no telepathy, no natural armor, no ability to survive in vacuum. She turned back to face the counselor. So we learned. We adapted. We evolved. Not our bodies, but our minds and our technology. She stepped closer to Vex. Despite his ancient power, despite his 2,000 years of life, the old Vitheran found himself stepping back. You and the other Concord species grew comfortable in your power, Chen continued. You stopped innovating because you had no reason to innovate. You stopped growing because you thought you had grown enough. You looked at the galaxy and saw yourselves as the pinnacle of evolution. Her voice grew soft, but somehow more frightening. Humanity never had that luxury. We looked at the galaxy and saw 1,000 ways we could die. We saw species that could crush us without effort. We saw threats that could end our entire civilization overnight. So we prepared. We built, we trained. We turned our fear into fuel and our weakness into strength. The counselor found his voice. The swarm has destroyed 17 civilizations. Civilizations that were older and stronger than humanity? Yes, Chen agreed. It has, and every one of those civilizations faced the swarm alone. They fought as individuals. They broke under pressure. They crumbled from the inside as hope faded. She gestured to the tactical display, which now showed the full deployment of humanity's fleet. 17,000 ships moving into position with perfect coordination. Supply lines extending from hidden bases. Reserves waiting in systems that the Concorde had never bothered to scan properly. Humanity will not face the swarm alone. We will face it together. Every human in this fleet knows exactly what they are fighting for. Every human knows their role. Every human is prepared to die so that others might live. She met Vex's ancient eyes with her own. That is what we are, Counselor. We are the species that never stopped being afraid. We are the civilization that built itself on the assumption that everything could go wrong at any moment. We are the people who learned that the only way to survive in a dangerous universe is to become more dangerous than the universe itself. The counselor said nothing. There was nothing to say. On every world in Concorde space, billions of beings watched the live feeds from the human fleet. They saw the ships that had been hidden for centuries. They saw the weapons that should not have existed. They saw the calm, determined faces of humans preparing for war, and for the first time, the galaxy began to understand. Humanity had never been the weak species they pretended to be. They had never been the harmless, forgettable creatures that smiled and accepted insults. They had been waiting, and now the wait was over. 20-4 hours until the swarm arrived. 24 hours until the greatest battle in galactic history began. Hi. Admiral Chen looked at her tactical display one final time. The swarm was coming. 1 billion ships. An ancient hunger. An unstoppable force that had devoured everything in its path. She smiled. Let them come. The swarm came out of the darkness like a living nightmare. A billion ships blackened the stars themselves. They moved as one, controlled by a single ancient mind that had been consuming civilization since before the Concord species had learned to walk upright. The Swarm Queen was older than most stars. She had eaten worlds beyond counting. She had never known defeat. On the bridge of the Prometheus, High Admiral Chen watched the enemy approach on her tactical display. The scale was almost impossible to comprehend. Each dot on her screen represented a ship. Each ship was a living weapon designed for one purpose only: destruction. All fleet units report status, she ordered. The responses came back instantly. 17,000 ships ready for combat. Crews at battle stations. Weapons armed. Shields powered. Everyone knew their role. Everyone was prepared. "The Concorde is requesting updates," Commander Okonkwo reported. "They want to know our battle plan. Tell them to watch and learn," Chen replied. She turned to her weapons officer. "Open fire." The first shots of the Battle of the Void crossed the empty space between fleets like angry stars. Human weapons found their targets with perfect accuracy. Swarm vessels exploded in silent flashes of light. But for every ship destroyed, 1,000 more kept coming. The swarm hit the human lines like a wave hitting a wall. Ships clashed in the darkness. Energy beams crossed and recrossed. Explosions bloomed and faded in seconds. The Concorde observers expected the human lines to break. They expected chaos and confusion. They expected the same collapse they had seen when every other civilization faced the swarm. They were wrong. Human ships moved with coordination that seemed almost supernatural. When one unit fell back, another moved forward to cover the gap. When a captain died, their second-in-command took over without hesitation. When communication lines were cut, ships continued fighting according to plans that had been memorized. Years in advance, Dr. Yuki Tanaka watched the battle from her command center on Europa. Around her, thousands of scientists monitored every aspect of the conflict. They tracked energy signatures. They analyzed swarm behavior. They calculated and adjusted and recalculated. "The Queen is directing forces to Section 7, one of her analysts reported. "She's testing our left flank." "Predictable," Tanaka said. "Deploy countermeasures. Package Alpha." In space, human ships in Section 7 suddenly changed formation. They created gaps in their lines that looked like weaknesses. The swarm poured through these gaps, eager to exploit the opening, and found themselves surrounded. Human vessels closed in from all sides. Weapons that had been hidden inside asteroid shields powered up and opened fire. In 3 minutes, the swarm forces that had entered Section 7 were completely destroyed. The Queen felt something she had not experienced in a very long time. Frustration. She pushed harder. She sent wave after wave of ships against the human lines. She used tactics that had broken 100 armies. She attacked from multiple directions at once. She tried to overwhelm single points with massive force. Nothing worked. The humans seemed to know what she was going to do before she did it. They countered every move. They turned every attack into a trap. They fought like they had been practicing for this battle their entire lives, which, of course, they had. Day 3 of the battle brought the first major human losses. A carrier group was caught in a trap that even human strategists had not predicted. 1,200 crew members died in the explosions that followed. Admiral Chen felt each death like a knife in her heart, but she did not hesitate. "Transmit their tactical data to the fleet," she ordered. "Their sacrifice will save others." It was a simple order, a cold order, but it was the way humans fought. Every death served a purpose. Every loss provided information. Even in dying, human soldiers contributed to victory. On day 5, the swarm changed tactics. The Queen had never encountered resistance like this. She began targeting human ships with suicide attacks. She no longer cared about her own losses. She just wanted to destroy as many humans as possible. This should have worked. The swarm had billions of vessels. Humanity had thousands. Pure numbers should have overwhelmed human defenses, but humans had prepared for this too. "Deploy the gravity lances," Admiral Chen ordered. Across the fleet, weapons that had been kept in reserve powered up for the first time. They did not fire energy beams or missiles. Instead, they created focus points of gravitational force that tore swarm vessels apart at the molecular level. The Queen screamed across dimensions. The sound echoed in the minds of every telepathic being in the galaxy. It was the sound of surprise, the sound of pain, the sound of an ancient predator meeting something it did not understand. Day 7 brought the turning point. Dr. Tanaka's voice came through the communication system. We have confirmed the theory. The Queen's central processing cluster is exactly where we predicted. We can deploy the Achilles Protocol. Chen closed her eyes for a moment. The Achilles Protocol was humanity's greatest secret. A weapon designed over 200 years by scientists who would never see it used. A weapon that targeted the one weakness the swarm did not know it had. Confirmed target location, Chen said. Confirmed. The Queen is in the center of the swarm formation, surrounded by her most powerful vessels. Probability of success? There was a pause. 73%. Chen opened her eyes. And if we don't use it? 0% chance of victory. The swarm will eventually overwhelm us through pure numbers. The Admiral looked at her bridge crew. They were tired. Some were injured. All of them had lost friends in the past 7 days. But their eyes were clear, and their hands were steady. Deploy the Achilles Protocol, she ordered, in Dr. Tanaka's facility. Machines that had waited 2 centuries for this moment activated. A signal was sent. A weapon unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen began its work. The Achilles Protocol did not destroy ships. It did not create explosions. Instead, it sent a carefully designed virus through the telepathic link that connected the Queen to her swarm. The virus was not digital. It was conceptual. It was an idea so terrible, so wrong. The Queen's ancient mind could not process it. The idea was simple. Fear. The Queen had never felt fear. For 100,000 years, she had been the predator. She had consumed. She had destroyed. She had never been prey. Now, for the first time, she understood what it felt like to be hunted. The scream that followed was heard across the galaxy. Every telepath collapsed. Every psychically sensitive being felt the Queen's agony. It was the sound of an immortal mind experiencing terror for the first time in its existence, and then the swarm began to run. Billions of ships that had only known attack suddenly reversed course. They fled in every direction, abandoning their formation, abandoning their purpose. The ancient connection between the Queen and her fleet shattered like glass. Admiral, Chen watched the chaos on her tactical display. All ships, she announced, her voice steady despite the exhaustion in her bones. Pursue and destroy. This ends today. The final phase of the Battle of the Void had begun. The Queen died in the darkness between galaxies. She had run as far as she could. Her fleet was scattered. Her mind was broken. The fear that humanity had planted in her consciousness had grown like a cancer, consuming everything she had been. When the human ships finally surrounded her, she was already dying. 100,000 years of existence ending not with glory, but with terror. High Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Prometheus and looked at the tactical display. The Queen's flagship was a massive vessel, larger than some moons. It hung in the void like a dying star, its systems failing one by one. A communication signal came through. The Queen wanted to talk. Chen accepted the connection. The voice that came through was ancient beyond imagination. It spoke in sounds that predated language itself, but human technology translated it into words that Chen could understand. "I surrender," the Queen said. "I submit to your species. Take what remains of my fleet. Use us as you wish. Only let me live." Chen was quiet for a long moment. Around her, the bridge crew watched and waited. This was the being that had consumed 17 civilizations. This was the monster that had ended trillions of lives. This was the darkness that had haunted the galaxy for 100,000 years, and now it was begging for mercy. "You destroyed 17 civilizations," Chen said finally. Trillions of innocent beings. Entire cultures erased. Histories lost forever. Art and science and love and hope all consumed by your hunger. Yes, the Queen admitted, but I can change. I can serve humanity. I can know, Chen interrupted. Her voice was calm but utterly final. There is no punishment proportionate to what you have done. There is no service that could balance your crimes. There is no future for you in this universe or any other. She turned to her weapons officer, a young ensign named Marcus Webb. His great-great-grandmother had written the first theoretical paper on faster-than-light travel. His grandfather had designed the shields that protected human ships. His mother had died on day 3 of the battle, her final transmission providing data that saved thousands of lives. Mr. Webb, Admiral Chen said, end this. Marcus Webb was 23 years old. He had dreamed of this moment since he was a child listening to his grandmother's stories. His hand did not shake as he activated the firing sequence. For everyone you ever hurt, he said quietly. The weapons fired. The Queen died, and for the first time in 100,000 years. The devouring swarm ceased to exist. 3 days later, Ambassador Alina Vasquez stood before the Galactic Concord Council once more. The chamber was different now. The ancient beings who had laughed at her 2 weeks ago no longer sat in positions of casual superiority. They leaned forward in their seats. They listened with complete attention. Some of them could not even meet her eyes. Alina looked around at them all. The Vitherans who had read every mind in the galaxy except human ones, the Korath who had believed themselves unbeatable until they saw human weapons, the Selenics who had thought their crystalline bodies made them special until they learned that humans had developed ways to survive in any environment. 12 ancient species. 12 empires that had ruled the stars for millions of years. 12 civilizations that had dismissed humanity as insects. All of them waiting to hear what she would say. I know what you're expecting, Alina began. You're expecting demands. You're expecting us to claim territory, to take your resources, to establish ourselves as the new rulers of the galaxy. And she paused. You're expecting us to treat you the way you treated us. No one spoke. No one moved. We could do that, Alina continued. We have the military power. We have the technology. We have 3 centuries of hidden infrastructure that you never knew existed. We could take everything. Her voice softened. But we won't. High Counselor Thessenvex found his voice. Why not? Alina smiled. Not the small, patient smile she had worn for 300 years. A real smile. Open and warm and genuine. Because that's not who we are. That was never who we were. She spread her hands. We hid our strength not because we wanted to conquer you someday, but because we were afraid. We built in secret because we knew the galaxy was dangerous. We prepared for war because we never believed peace would last forever. Her eyes meeting those of each counselor in turn. But we didn't hide so that we could one day reveal ourselves as tyrants. We hid because we wanted to protect ourselves. And when the time came, we fought because we wanted to protect you. Protect us. Gork's voice was confused. We mocked you. We dismissed you. We gave you the worst worlds and laughed at your weakness. Yes, Alina agreed. You did, and it hurt. Every joke, every pitying glance, every condescending comment, it all hurt. She took a breath. But you also gave us a chance. When you found Earth, you could have destroyed us, conquered us, enslaved us. Instead, you let us join the galactic community. You let us live among the stars. You made mistakes, but you also showed mercy. She looked around the chamber. Humanity does not forget cruelty, but we also do not forget kindness. You were imperfect allies, but you were allies nonetheless. And when allies are in danger, humans do not abandon them. The silence in the chamber was different now, warmer, more thoughtful. What do you want from us? The Simvex asked. This time, there was no condescension in his voice. Only genuine curiosity. Partnership, Alina said. Real partnership. We have spent 3 centuries hiding who we are, building in secret, training in isolation. It was necessary, but it was also lonely. Her smile returned. We would like to spend the next 3 centuries as equals, sharing our knowledge openly, learning from your experience honestly, building a future together that none of us could build alone. She extended her hand, palm up, in the ancient human gesture of peace. You asked what humanity has become. We became a species that could face the greatest terror in the galaxy and win. But that's not what we want to be. We want to be partners, teachers, students, friends. One by one, the counselors rose from their seats. One by one, they approached the human ambassador, who'd worn a mask for 300 years and finally removed it. Vex reached out with his ancient, trembling hand and placed it in Elena's. Friends, he repeated. Yes, I believe we would like that very much. Outside the council chamber, across the galaxy, the news spread. The swarm was defeated. Humanity had revealed its true power. And instead of conquest, humans offered friendship, in bars and homes and ships across 1,000 worlds. Beings of every species raised glasses and made toasts. To the quiet species that had not been quiet at all, to the weak species that had been stronger than anyone imagined, to the humans who had saved the galaxy and asked for nothing in return, but in quiet corners, in private conversations, in whispered discussions behind closed doors, the other species asked each other the same question. They could have conquered us. They had the power. They had the opportunity. They could have made us pay for every insult. Instead, they saved us. What does that say about them? And what else are they capable of? The galaxy had met humanity, and the galaxy would never stop wondering what they would do next. On Earth, in a small garden behind a modest house, an old woman sat with her grandchildren. She told them stories of the stars, of battles won and sacrifices made, of a species that had learned to hide its strength until the day that strength was needed. One of the children, a girl of 7, asked the question that children always ask, Grandma, why did we have to hide for so long? The old woman smiled and pulled the child close. Because, my dear, the strongest people are not those who show their power to everyone. The strongest people are those who have power and choose when to use it. We hid because we were not ready. We revealed ourselves because others needed us. And that is what makes us human. The child nodded, satisfied with the answer. Above them, the stars burned bright and eternal, and somewhere among them, humanity continued to watch, to wait, to prepare, because the universe was vast and full of dangers, and humanity would always be ready.